mid-sized farm. It's about 20 acres, and 18 of the acres are going to be where our actual coffee farming land is. So these are majority of our trees that you see down below. And you can see that green roof down there as well. That's going to be the top of our wet mill, so that's where all of our wet mill processing is done. And that's kind of the end of our farm as well. So
what is wet mill processing?
So that's the first part of the process once picking the cherries. So removing the skin.
Cherries?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we call them cherries.
Okay.
Have you guys been to a coffee farm before?
No,
No?
I have
First
not.
time?
That's
Awesome.
the first time.
Yeah, so we planted our trees in the 1990s, and they take about 5 years to actually start producing fruit. But after the 5 years, they have a lifespan of 100 years. So yeah, once they're in, they are pretty set, but they can start decreasing in the amount of fruit they produce over time. So we'll always have coffee seedlings growing that we can use to swap out. And we also get a lot of wild pigs that like to come through and knock over the trees to get the grubs and stuff. So when that happens, we'll obviously swap them out as well. But yeah, we're located along the Kona Belt and do thrive along the Kona Belt. And the Kona Belt is about 20 miles long, 2-ish, 3 miles wide. There are about 600 plus other coffee farms just along that 20-mile stretch. So a lot of the U.S. coffee is produced here in Kona. And what makes it such a popular place to grow coffee are a few factors. One being the soil. It's volcanic soil, so it's very rich in phosphates, nitrates, iron, and magnesium, which obviously helps promote healthy plant growth. And then volcanic soil is also very porous, and we tend to get rain here pretty consistently. So that porousness kind of just helps prevent the trees from being overwatered. And yeah, that's another factor, our climate. It's usually pretty sunny throughout the day, and then in the evenings the clouds will roll in along with the rain. It kind of just gives the trees a break from the sun. And yeah, it's pretty much like that year round, so we don't really have seasons here. It does get a little bit wetter during the winter, but the trees seem to thrive with that as well. So yeah, and then our last factor is going to be our altitude. We're at about 1,400 feet here, and anything too much lower is a little too warm, and then anything too much higher is a little too cool. So the Kona Belt ranges from around 800 feet to around 2,500. Yeah, that's like a sweet spot for the coffee to grow, basically. But any groups of 15 plus people, usually immigrant workers that come through and kind of pick at all of the farms. So yeah.
Dr. Joe has a patent on the trellis because he found out somehow you could produce more.
Yes.
So what exactly, how did he find that out?
Dr. Joe, I think his brother owned a wine vineyard in California, and Dr. Joe was basically just like, since coffee is a fruit, why can't it be trellised? So
okay.
Yeah.
And then he found out that you could actually produce more by trellising it. Mm-hmm. And he patented it so no one else could do it.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. It opens the tree up a whole ton more. On our way back up.
Sell? Do you do it? They were saying up there online only, or?
Yeah, so it's just our gift shop that we have here, and then online sales to like.
And what is your online website?
KonaJoe.com.
KonaJoe.com.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty easy. That's simple. They're hard to see when they're green because they blend in, but yep, that's them. So they'll go from green to kind of like a yellowy color to an orangey color, and then red. And red is when they're ready to be picked.
And that's why you call them cherries, because they're red.
To produce one crop per year. The cherries are hand-picked from September through November. The entire Kona crop is hand-picked. Unfortunately, the cherries do not all ripen at the same time. It takes 1,600 coffee cherries to yield 1 pound of roasted coffee. Hand-picking is one of the unique features of Kona Coffee. It's hard work, but quality over quantity is our priority. Once picked, 5 layers of the coffee fruit must be removed to reach the green coffee bean inside. These 5 layers from outside in are the skin, pulp, mucilage, husk, and silver skin. The first 3 layers are removed in the wet mill. Here we use conveyors and recirculating water to move the coffee cherries through the mill. The pulper has a spinning, corrugated surface that gently strips away the skin and pulp. The wet, slippery seeds pass through the centrifuge to remove the mucilage. Next, the coffee is washed and washed again. This process refines the flavor. You may have heard the term washed Arabica coffee. Next, the coffee must be dried from 50% moisture down to 10% moisture content. The drying process is critical to prevent mold and make the coffee stable for storage. The drying process takes about 16 hours. The moisture content is repeatedly checked to make sure the coffee is neither too wet or too dry. Dried coffee parchment is brought to our dry mill, where the last 2 layers are removed. Here, the coffee husk and silver skin are removed by the huller. The size grater separates the beans by size. It works just like a coin separator with screens of different sizes. The largest beans are the extra fancy. Not all beans have the same density. After separating by size, each bag of beans is further separated by density on our gravity density table. The largest, most dense beans go into our trellis reserve coffee. Your coffee should be beautiful and pleasurable to drink without bitterness. The first cup should leave you asking for a refill. Only the best coffees in the world go through all these meticulous steps. The green beans are now ready for roasting.
Awesome, thank you for watching that. Alright, so this is our actual dry mill, and these are going to be the parchment beans. So yeah, basically the cherries once wet fill processed, and they have those last 2 layers on them, so that husk and silver skin. And if you want, you can try to remove them yourself. The husk comes off pretty easily. But
This is, what is this again? The first?
that's our puller machine.
Okay.
So that's what removes.
Last one.
No, you're all good. There's plenty more if you want. But yeah, that's what removes the husk and the silver skin of the parchment beans. That's okay. So yeah, and then with the husk and silver skin, that kind of starts to come out like this, which will actually turn this into a mulch and put back into the ground as fertilizer as well. And then what comes out of the holder are the green beans, so the unroasted coffee. But before roasting, we have to sort them by size and by density, because if we were to just roast the coffee right after hulling it, the lighter beans would burn and the heavier ones wouldn't roast as much. So the green beans will head next. And like the video said, it's almost like a coin sorter machine. If you kind of come back here, it's cool to see the different layers. So basically each layer has a screen, and each screen has different size holes that each seed will fit through. So yeah, I can take a step to the front again. So yeah, our extra fancy and fancy beans on the end here, and these are the actual names in the coffee world that kind of make me laugh
interesting.
for some reason. But yeah, the extra fancy and fancy are going to be the largest, most dense beans of the crop, and so those two are actually paired together into our trellis reserve bag. So that's kind of the best stuff from our harvest, basically. And then we have peaberry, which is a special little bean. It's a genetic mutation that happens naturally throughout the plant. So in a normal coffee cherry, there's usually 2 halves of the seed inside, but for the peaberry, the 2 halves are actually morphed together into one little pea-sized seed. And they say since that one seed gets all the nutrients, it actually has more caffeine, less acidity, and more antioxidants. And they look different in comparison to a fancy bean. They're much smaller and kind of rounded out.
This is actually, so the pea berry,
Yeah.
less acidity, more nutrients.
More caffeine.
How do you find a pea berry? Like, I've never heard that before, so.
Peaberry? Yeah, so you don't figure out it's a peaberry until it comes to the size grader.
So when I'm buying coffee, how do I know it's a pea berry?
Oh, it's called peaberry.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, like on our bag it'll say.
I think we'll start drinking pea berry because it's better for you, less acidity.
Yeah, people with like acid reflux and stuff say they can drink it and not have a problem. It's very light bodied. It's almost tea-like to me, but yeah, it's very good. It's a very small percent of our crop though, so it's like 3%. We don't get very much of it, so that's actually our most expensive stuff that we have. But yeah, it's the rarest, I guess. We just lower grade to our extra fancy and fancy, so not quite as large, not quite as dense. It's kind of like grade A, then grade B, but these two are paired together as well into our trellis signature bags. And then on the very end, we have mother beans, which are also the largest beans, but they're the lightest, so sometimes they'll tend to break throughout processing. So the damaged ones will actually turn into ground coffee since it's kind of halfway there. But if they do come out whole and dense enough, we'll add them in with our extra fancy and fancy beans.
Interesting.
And then after size grading, we'll bring them to our density grader over here. And for this one, you basically just dump the green beans in at the bottom. They'll get sucked up and then released onto this table. And I like to compare this one to an air hockey table almost. Basically, air just gets pushed through these little slits and kind of just shifts back and forth. The heavy beans will fall up top, and then the lighter ones will fall down below. And that's just another way we'll sort the coffee before roasting. And then we'll store our green beans in these burlap sacks because they're still at 10% humidity in the green bean stage, so they need to be able to breathe. And then we'll also store them back here. And this is going to be our temperature and humidity control room. And yeah, you'll notice there's no paint or anything on the walls. That's just because the beans will kind of start to adapt the flavor of what surrounds them. So same if we had like cedar wood or something strong like that, it'd kind of start to adapt that. So yeah, we can store green beans in here for up to 3 years, but we actually tend to run out of our crop before we even start our next harvest season, so they do not. Green beans obviously don't have the same flavors and aromas as roasted coffee does, so roasting is basically where the magic happens in the whole process. This is my favorite room out of them all. But yeah, this is our roasting room, and these are going to be our little micro roasters. So we have 10 of them, and they each roast 2 pounds of coffee each, and they're just for our tours. Whereas our actual roaster, what we roast all of our stuff on, that's like in our gift shop behind the coffee bar and to ship out as well, that's going to be a 25-pound roaster. which isn't very large, so we do pretty small batches here, but that kind of just allows us to keep everything fresher for the customers. And we also, so we'll be roasting like weekly when we do have green beans in stock to roast. But yeah, I have an example of a light roast, medium roast, dark, and then espresso. This espresso isn't very oily just because it's been kind of sitting out a while, but typically an espresso roast is going to be a lot more oily and smooth in comparison to the drier, more wrinkly light roast. And that's just because the longer you roast the coffee, the more the oils get extracted from the bean and brought to the surface, as well as burned off. And the caffeine is actually kept inside the oil of the bean, so that is why a light roast has more caffeine than the espresso roast, which I never knew before working here for some reason. Yeah.
I always thought the espresso was more caffeine.
Right? Because I feel like the darker the roast kind of have a more bold taste, so your mind automatically goes to like more caffeine.
Yeah.
But
Aren't we kind of like taught that espresso is more caffeine?
Yeah, because when you go to like certain places, they tell you you want an espresso shot, you think you're getting more caffeine.
yes, yeah, well, since an espresso shot is much more concentrated than like a cup of coffee, or kind of talking about like cups of coffee, like if you're to drink a cup of light roast in comparison to a cup of dark roast, you'd get more caffeine with the light roast. But since the espresso shot is so concentrated, you'll probably get like the same amount as in comparison to like a whole cup of coffee. Yes.
So what do you get for the tour? So when people come for the tour, what do they all get? They get...
So you'll get, if you do the roasting tour, you'll get your own little Kona Joe mug. This one doesn't have the rubber bottom that it typically comes with, but your guys' will. And then you also get 12-ounce cup of coffee, if you guys got that already, but and then a 2-ounce little sample bag as well. But yeah.
Okay.
Also, I was just going to mention, so for our extra fancy and fancy beans, along with the pea berry, we keep those at a medium roast. We don't go any darker, and that's just because with a light and medium roast, you're more so tasting the origin of the coffee you're drinking, whereas when you get into the darker espresso roast, you're kind of just tasting like the burnt roast. These machines, and I'll kind of give you an overview of what we'll be doing today. And it's just an overview. You don't have to remember everything I'm telling you yet. I'll walk you through as we do it. But yeah, I'll start off by saying these machines do get very hot, so we're going to be careful what we touch. Basically everything shiny and metal and inviting is going to be very hot, so be careful. But in a moment, I'm going to have you guys weigh out your 10 ounces of green beans, and then what you're going to be left with is 8 ounces of roasted coffee, because 2 ounces get roasted out in that moisture, and then in the oil as well. So yeah, this is called our hopper. This is what we'll drop our green beans into. To release them into our drum, we're just going to pull this for like 3 seconds to let them fall, and then just close it back up again to keep that heat in. But that's just going to release them into this spinning hot drum here. Once you release them, I'll have you come over to your panel and hit your timing button in the center here, and that's just going to start your timer. And so for about 1.5 to 2 minutes, your bean temp is going to drop pretty drastically because you put cold beans into a hot drum. But once you see it start to climb back up is when I'm going to have you crank up your fire adjust to about 80, and that's kind of just going to kickstart your roast. And so with these machines, they're not as high tech as our actual roaster. That one has a whole conductor stand almost, and like an iPad screen and a graph that you follow. So it's a lot easier to go by time and by temp on that guy. You can actually automatically roast on it as well. You just click what beans you're using and what roast you want, and it just does it for you. Whereas these ones are a little more hands-on, a little more manual, I guess. So yeah, we kind of go by sight and by sound because each machine is a little, they're all unique, I guess. They're all a little bit different. They all work a little differently. But what kind of roast are you thinking of doing today?
I want what I just...
So we're doing medium coffee.
All right, so yeah, there's one thing we'll listen for then. So there's a thing called the first crack. And basically what's happening there is the pressure of the water vapor within the bean is starting to expand. So it creates these cracking, popping noises. Sounds pretty similar to popcorn. But that usually happens at around 400 degrees, about 8 to 10 minutes into your roast. And that first crack indicates that you're in a light roast.
Our cups, 10 ounces to start the roasting process.
Crank it up up to around, let's do 70 for now. Actually, we can just go all the way to 80.
How exciting.
Stall out at around 420. We'll probably pour it at around 410, 415-ish. They'll look kind of different, a different color than to when you actually pull them out. But
Is it actually lighter in the window or darker?
it looks lighter to me in the window, yeah.
Okay. So when you hear the popping, what's that again?
It's basically your hint that you're at a light roast.
You're at a light roast.
Yes.
And the longer you go, you're changing the roast.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, once those first cracks kind of die down is when you're basically getting into your medium roast. So yeah, you're going to be getting close here pretty soon. In a sec, I'll have you pull out another sample in about 20 seconds, because once it gets close, it changes pretty quickly. But yeah, we're probably done. We're at about 410 right now, so.
So you're saying it's almost done for a medium roast?
Yes, yeah. You want to go ahead and pull out a sample? Wow. That looks pretty dang good to me. Alright. You can honestly let it go. Check it again in like 15 seconds, but that looks pretty good. And you're
Okay, it's starting to crack now. Yeah, it's starting to crack, so...
a little more spaced out.
So we're at 400 degrees. We're close to being finished for a medium brew. Medium, okay.
It's all right on here, my name.
Yeah. Or whatever. You can put the name if you want, or what roast you did.
So I got a medium roast for coffee.
Okay.
That honestly is looking pretty good.
I'm not sure. What is today's date? The 19th?
I think it's the 18th. I think so. Oh yeah, and lift this guy up. Be careful, that's very hot.
Is yours in there? Oh.
I already did my bag.
Okay, we're ready to pour the coffee beans in our bags.
By now, go ahead and hold this here.
Hold this.
And then this top lever just gets pulled towards me. It comes out pretty abruptly, so there's always some stragglers. So make sure you get them all.
Come on, guys. I want them all.
One more. Oh, wait, another one. No, no, no. Hold your bag and I'll just lift this up.
And just zip it shut.
Yep. And then after we're done,
Whoops.
dropping kids, we'll go ahead and see that. I like to hold it as it goes through, just so it's even. Because it kind of tends to make it slanted if you don't hold it as you push it.
All the way back through.
I'm in number 1 beans, and then that's our medium of our gourmet blend.
So this is the gift shop.